on this episode of the Jeff Does Vegas podcast.
The story that I tell is that I remember watching the old Batman, Burt Ward, and Adam West show. And it was a Frank Gorshin Riddler episode. He's trying to, I think, steal money from a movie studio. But there's a whole Charlie Chaplin gig that he does. And he's doing the funny, tramp walk. And I thought that was so hysterical. And I had family over, like the cousins and uncles and aunts. And I did the funny Charlie Chaplin walk for them, like to get attention. And they all laughed. And I've been chasing that laugh ever since.
Las Vegas. It's more than just a city. It's a feeling. It's that feeling of excitement when you spot the lights of the Strip out the airplane window. It's that feeling of awe as you stroll down the boulevard, taking in the sights and sounds. And it's that feeling of satisfaction, knowing that you're in the greatest city in the world. Over 42 million people from around the world share that feeling every year. And I'm one of them. Taking you to the world-famous Vegas Strip and beyond, my name is Jeff, and this is the Jeff Does Vegas podcast. Hey there, and welcome to episode number 102 of Jeff Does Vegas. Before we get going for this episode of the podcast, I want to thank my guest from the last episode of the show, John Shaw, Vegas magician, illusionist, and sideshow performer. John was kind enough to share his story with me, including his crazy road to Vegas and what motivates him to freak people out by eating light bulbs, swallowing swords, and dangling paint cans from hooks stuck through his eyelids. If you haven't had a chance to listen as of yet, jump into the archives at jeffdoesvegas.com or search out episode number 101, my special guest, John Shaw, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, here we go. On to the show. My guest this time around has been a part of the Vegas performance scene for close to 20 years. Enoch Augustus Scott got his start with the classic show Tony and Tina's Wedding and currently stars as Zenoch, the host and MC of Zombie Burlesque at the V Theater in the Miracle Mile Shops at Planet Hollywood. Enoch and I discussed what initially got him interested in entertaining, some of his early Vegas gigs, his pandemic project, The Tiger Thing, and he shared what might possibly be the most only in Vegas story ever. Please enjoy my conversation with Enoch Augustus Scott.
I've been in Vegas for almost 20 years. I moved here in 2002. But I grew up in North Carolina. I spent from like the age of 2.5 to 21 in North Carolina. Grew up in Charlotte. And then I went to school at Duke University, which is in Durham, just up the road from Charlotte. And then as soon as I graduated from college, I moved out to the West Coast. And I lived in Seattle for a couple years. I lived in LA for like 5 years. And then living in LA, I did Tony and Tina's Wedding. They did a revival on Hollywood Boulevard with the original original director, and the original Tina, and producing and directing the whole thing. And so I became friends with Nancy Casaro, who was the original Tina in Tony and Tina's Wedding. And then they needed some help in Vegas for a couple of weeks, and I came out to help, and a couple of weeks turned into 2 years, which turned into 20 years.
It's weird how that happens. That seems to be a common thread with a lot of Vegas entertainers that I talk to, is they seem to, as you say, they come out for, one little project that they think is maybe going to last a little bit. And then, the next thing you know, 20 years later, you're still in the city. Yeah,
it's a great town to be a middle-class artist. It's a working town. When it's pumping, it's pumping. When it's, when things like the economic collapse or the pandemic hit, it hits us super hard. But when this town is pumping, it's pumping, and there's work for people. You can have a house that isn't the size of a closet. You can have a pool, you can, have a car, and you can have a family and that kind of thing. So I think, especially for people who have done the New York or LA thing and maybe not found it to work for them, they get to Vegas and, they can find some work and they can make some money. And then all of a sudden, all that struggling artist stuff isn't so prevalent in one's mind, if that makes sense.
When did the entertainment bug first kind of bite you? When did you first realize, this is what I want to do?
My mother, Miss Betty Ann Cathy, had always wanted a creative child. Like she had tried to put all of her kids in violin classes and piano classes and stuff like that. And I was the kid it just really took with. Like she put me in puppet classes and stuff. But the story that I tell is that I remember watching the old Batman, Burt Ward and Adam West show, which I loved. I loved that version of Batman. It's so colorful, and the characters were so fantastic, and all the actors that they had to come in to play the villains were so incredible. And it was a Frank Gorshin Riddler episode, and I think it's the first episode that the Riddler appears in. But he's trying to, I think, steal money from a movie studio. But there's a whole Charlie Chaplin gig that he does in it. And so Frank Gorshin as the Riddler is doing Charlie Chaplin, and he's doing the funny, tramp walk. And I thought that was so hysterical. And I had family over. They were all in the front room. There's green shag carpeting and sheetrock because it was the 70s. And the family was over, like the cousins and uncles and aunts. And I did the funny Charlie Chaplin walk for them, like to get attention. And they all laughed. And it was like at that. And I've been chasing that laugh ever since.
So I'm assuming then that entertainment was kind of, that was always what you wanted to do, or was there something else on the back burner just as a just in case?
Nope. It's all I've ever wanted to do. It's all I know how to do. The only other thing I ever even remotely considered was being a cetologist, a marine biologist who studied whales and dolphins and porpoises. But yeah, I went to Duke to study theater. When I went there, there was a small period at Duke where the drama department was almost like conservatory-like. So the idea was that you would get a great liberal arts education, obviously, and then also get some really intense drama training, theater training, and acting training. So the class that I went to Duke with was people who were my drama class was, very focused on being performers and being in the theater industry and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I went to Duke to learn how to act and direct. And then I didn't get into grad school. So I headed to the West Coast and really fumbled around for a long time trying to figure out how to make a theater and women's studies degree work in the real world. But I was a personal assistant in LA and worked for this woman who had a lot of connections in Hollywood and, learned a lot about sort of that industry from that perspective. And then finally ended up in Vegas doing what I love, which is being on a stage in front of people. Like I love live performing. There's just nothing like it. So I'm so fortunate and grateful that my destiny sort of ended up here in Las Vegas.
You mentioned that that first gig, Tony and Tina's Wedding, which is such a fun show and one of those shows that still is performed all over the place to this day. Did you have any other sort of bizarre first gigs in Vegas? I know in other entertainers that I've talked to, they mention about being singing waiters or singing bartenders or dancing card dealers or anything like that.
So after Tony and Tina's Wedding, I did that for like 2 years, and then I started gigging. So I was doing I would host slot tournaments. I would just work corporate events. The worst, I had to be one of those living statues once. I only did that once. That was awful. But I've done everything. I helped out Nathan Burton backstage. I would stand on Flamingo Boulevard handing out 2-for-1 Nathan Burton like buffet coupons for him. I drove his driving billboard, and then I started auditioning for shows. I got back into shows and stuff. But every show I would get would run for like 2 months. I did like Cannibal the Musical down at the Plaza. I did this Las Vegas vaudeville show that we started out at Bonnie Springs, and it was so great. And then we brought it to the Strip, and nobody gave an F. And that ran for like 2 months. I did Awesome 80s Prom, which is another environmental improv-y kind of show. I did that. That was another one that ran for 2 months and then closed. I was like the king of shows that would run for 2 months and close. And then Zombie hit. And then that sort of changed my whole career.
Yeah, let's talk about Zombie Burlesque. This seems like such a fun show. Runs at the V Theater inside the Miracle Mile shops at Planet Hollywood. Tell me a little bit about the show, the premise, the plot. What's the show all about?
The premise is that has been zombie human war, but they've come to a truce. And the truce is that if humans give zombies prisoners to eat, then zombies won't eat the innocent humans anymore. So now humans and zombies can hang out. So this is the first night where humans have come to the Zombie Burlesque Club. And so we're just doing our normal show, but slowly things start to go wrong, and humans may or may not almost get eaten, and then we say goodbye and the curtain closes. Tell some dick jokes and some titty jokes and escape.
Dick and titty jokes, very important in any Vegas show, in my opinion.
Yeah, my job is mostly to change costume and tell dick jokes.
Nice. Tell me a little bit about the character that you play in the show. You are the host of the show.
Zenoch is it sounds like it, and everyone's always like, oh, it's just like you heightened. And he's obviously, when you're an actor and you create a part, it's a part of you, but he's such a specific part of me. I've always loved old vaudeville humor. I've loved like the Catskill comedians, old like Jewish New York, the roots of like American stand-up comedy have just always fascinated me, and I've always been a fan of that era. And so to me, he's that. He's the worst stand-up comedian you'll ever see, but he's so lovable and charming, and he really honestly wants everyone to have fun and have a good time, and he loves tits, and he loves dick, and loves ass, and loves people, and but so that's him, and he's just the owner of the club, and that he's sort of the Lord Zombie. I like to think of him. They're all his minions, but he's also Kermit the Frog. He's like trying to put on this show, and everything the wacky shenanigans keep on happening behind him, and he's trying to make sure the audience doesn't see it, but they keep, so it's that kind of character. And so how did you get connected with this show initially? Tell me a little bit about the audition process. There used to be a thing called VegasAuditions.com, and everybody in town had it, and everybody in town went on it, and that's where the auditions were listed. And because I'm an actor in a town that has absolutely no need for actors, I had to go to any and every audition that was even remotely right for me. So I learned how to really look at auditioning as just a thing you did. Don't take it personal. Like every audition is a chance to make you better. Maybe you don't get the gig, but maybe you meet somebody while you're waiting who, or maybe that person remembers you the next time, the director or the producer, the next time you go into audition for them. Like I really learned, you just 90% of the game is showing up. You just have to show up, because so many people don't. So many people are conquered by their fears and insecurities and doubts and don't show up. Mm-hmm. And all you have to do is get in your car and drive to the audition. If you suck, you suck. But who cares? They're not going to cut off your feet and hands and send you into the street, because you had a bad audition. Right. If you had a bad audition, go and eat some ice cream and get over it. So I would go to every audition, and that's how I ended up in all these shows that wouldn't run. But then the audition for Zombie Burlesque came up, and I was like, this is my show. This is a burlesque show. I'd always been sort of tangentially involved in sort of the burlesque world and some of the neo-burlesque world. And I was like, this is my show. I have to get this show. This is meant for me. But I was doing a gig at the Bourbon Room at the Venetian, which was like an 80s bar that was attached to Rock of Ages. Ah, yes. Very, very familiar with the former Bourbon Room. Used to spend a lot of time there. Yeah, I would work there twice a month as the Marvelous Mark. I would fill in for him, the host, and dress in 80s rocker clothes. But I would be there till 4 a.m. or so. The gig was late. And then, so I didn't make it was 2 auditions, Friday and Monday for Zombie. I didn't make the Friday, so I was going to go Monday. But I was wrecked. I didn't from the night before. I didn't really have a song to sing. I was just and I called up my best friend, Katie Kenner, now Katie DeGraff. And I was like, Katie, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I'm not prepared. And she was like, just go. And so I just went. And I talked a lot of shit. I was like, listen, nobody in this town can host the show but me. Just, you got to cast me. Nobody else can do it. And then I go and sit down. They're like, David's not here. Just go and wait for David Sachs, the producer. So I go and sit down. This other boy sings and, gets up to audition. And this kid sings Maria from West Side Story like an angel. Like I'd never heard a human being sing before. And I was like, if that is what they're going for, I'm fucked. So I was like, what can I do? 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 And I was like, okay, you've got to do something. So I Googled the Vincent Price monologue to Thriller on my phone. And then when David or Tyler, whoever got there, I went up and like did the monologue from Thriller in the Vincent Price voice. And then said, thank you very much. Goodbye. And then didn't hear for a little bit, but then finally heard. And David called me up and he was like, hey, do you want to do the gig? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, you don't even know the money yet. And I was like, I don't care. I want the gig. And then before the show would open, he'd give me like 2 raises and stuff. They weren't really, as it turns out from that audition, they weren't really aware of what I was capable of doing. So it took them a moment to realize that I had skill sets other than Vincent Price impersonations. And so, yeah, that's how I started working with Zombie. And then 8 years later.
And being that you are a original cast member and that you were there right from the beginning, I'm assuming you've had some input into the development of the show and the development of your character.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Well, they really gave me a lot of creative freedom. So a lot of his jokes and stuff and the monologues were crafted by me with direction from them and stuff. So yeah, I had a lot of it. It was a really incredible experience. The building of Zombie was an incredible creative experience. It was just, and they trusted me so much and gave me so much room to play and figure it out and figure myself out. And it was great. It's still been great. I mean, when we came back from pandemic, rebuilding it again was fantastic and so cool in a different way, just chill. And, but Vegas is a town with some of the best live performers like in the country. Like you're working with some of the best. So it's always nice to be able to have that creative time before it becomes, the daily grind.
And I'm assuming that there's still a little bit of that development of the show and of the character going on, and that it's a live show, and it's that kind of live show where you are interacting to a certain degree with the audience. And that's going to vary from show to show and audience to audience, right?
It's like 98% like shit I've done before. And there's 2% magic that happens every night. But it looks like 50-50 because that's my job, is to make things look like they're just happening that night for the first time. But, after doing it for so long, I generally speaking have a response to anything because I've encountered so many things. So there's always like something in here. I think Bianca Del Rio, like it's her Rolodex of hate, she would call it. But like when you're a stand-up comedian or MC or whatever, you have these in your toolkit. You have all these things you say or quips or whatever for almost any situation. But for sure, there is a degree of like, but that's where the magic happens, is that like right around the edges where it's only that night that you're going to see that thing happen, or the audience is such an important part of the show. It really is a mix between the two of us. So like every night seems different and unique for sure. I had to kick a hooker out a week and a half ago.
I saw that on your Twitter. Now, this is probably the most Vegas entertainer story that I've ever heard in my life. So I'm going to need you to share it because the tweet just absolutely slayed me.
It's like in the front row, even up against the wall. In our theater strange, there's only one aisle, and so there's only one way to get out. So if you're up against the wall, you have to cross over everyone and get out. So come in late, this guy and this chick who was very, very pretty and, very, very Vegasly dressed, and this guy who looked like she was completely out of his league. It just, anyway, looked like an arrangement to me. So it was cool for a while, and then she just starts getting louder and louder, and just like, there are those people who want just heckling you and just like not stopping and like interrupting scenes. And she's just getting progressively louder. And finally I had to turn to her and be like, hey, it's too much now. Please stop. Like in front of the audience and stuff, I'm doing this. Like, please, it's too much. You have to stop. Turn to the guy and I'm like, hey, you have to take care of this. You have to handle her. And she's like, no, I want you to handle me. It's like, what I wanted to say is like, I didn't dial like 976 girls direct to you today. So please, I'm not handling you. That's not my job. And so I was like, listen, if you can be cool, listen, I'm literally saying this in front of the audience. I was like, if you can be cool, you can stay. But if you say one more thing, you've got to go. And I was like, audience, is it cool if she stays? And they're like, okay. So then like, there's an adagio, there's the 2 quiet moments. I'm off stage. I come back and like, she yells out something again. And you could hear the audience just go like, And then I was like, and then I come back out and I'm trying to do this tender speech where I go like, it doesn't matter if you're white, white, black, red, yellow, blue, and I'm about to say green, but of course people also do that phrase and say purple. So every now and then people like to scream out purple. So she, of course, screams out, purple! And I was like, okay, I just can't anymore, honey. You got to go. And she's like, what? No, I'm your best friend. I was like, no, you have to go now. And so then my stagehands, like, the ushers aren't there, so I have to call my stagehands. One is Dan, he's a little fit guy, but the other is Silver, and we call him Silverback. He's like 6'3" and like this big guy. And so I was like, Dan, Silverback, and you can hear the audience be like, Silverback, would you please come escort this young lady out of the theater? And so she gets up and is walking out and just talking shit. They're like, I can't believe it. I'm such an awful person. I can't believe it. Just all the way. And then he is sitting there, and I was like, no, bro, you got to go too. You got to return this hooker to her pimp, because you got a defective hooker, honey. You got a hooker that don't know how to act at a show. Like, you want to bring a hooker to a show, great, but she has to know how to act, honey. So I had to kick the guy out too. The guy, I couldn't believe the guy was just sitting there. I was like, no, baby. You need to take her back to where you found her.
I do love the fact that the dude was just kind of like, no, I'm not with her. I don't know who she is or what.
Man alive, honey. Man alive, honey. Take her back to Tropicana. And then the thing is, like, the night before, there was this 11-year-old kid who read as trans to me. I thought it was a boy, but then there were nails and stuff. So to me, it looked like a trans kid. And but 11 years old, and I couldn't believe it. So I always have a bit with it if there's kids in the audience. I'm like, but I'm doing that final speech this night's before the hooker gets kicked out, a completely different night. I'm doing that final tender speech, and the kid goes like, she's like, honestly, just says during a break, which is the nice way to heckle or not heckle, but just talk back. She's like, honestly, I can't wait to meet you. And my heart was broken. I couldn't finish my monologue. So, and we don't do meet and greet anymore because of COVID, but I went back after the show. I just snuck out and met the kid. It turns out the kid they wanted to come there for their birthday. Their mom tells me to Zombie Burlesque in Vegas to see my stupid show for their birthday. And then it's like a mom and the kid and a grandma. And there's a service dog too that I didn't even notice until that moment. I was like, that service dog sat through my whole show. And it's loud and crazy. It was fine and polite, but a hooker can't sit through it. So, and then a week later, just recently, we do a couples game where we bring a couples up, put the boy in the isolation booth, and the only couple there that was newlyweds was a guy with a service dog. So it was this huge, Great Dane, Marmaduke of a service dog. We brought him up on stage, and it sat outside the isolation booth and was chill. I guess ultimately my point is I have encountered a lot of variables during my course of time at Zombie Burlesque, and it's equipped me with a lot of tools in my kit to handle those sort of random wacky things. So my nemesis are 50-year-old, middle-aged white women who get drunk and want to come to Las Vegas and be super loud. My other nemesis is the two guys who have read Hunter S. Thompson's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and want to recreate it and think that their job is to come to Vegas and do a lot of blow and hookers and scream things at shows. So we had two of those recently, just literally screaming out I was like, so what's everybody been doing? It's like, hookers and blow! I was like, ha 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 ha, funny for a second. And then I'm having to handle them. And then eventually I called up the ushers and I said, listen, it can't be my job to kick these people out. So someone else has to come and talk to these gentlemen and tell them that perhaps this is not the best venue for their. I love it. It makes you a dragon though. That's my thing about Vegas. I always say there's an old, you'll pardon me, but I'm a Buddhist and it really does frame my entire life. And there's an old Buddhist Chinese myth about there's a pond of koi fish and there's a waterfall, and if the koi fish can make it up the waterfall, they become a dragon. And obviously, the allegory is that it isn't the destination that makes you a dragon. It's getting up the waterfall that makes you a dragon. And so, to me, Las Vegas is that waterfall. If you can make it up this waterfall, you become an incredible creature with incredible talent and skill sets and all that kind of stuff.
And the ability to come back on guys that yell out hookers and blow.
sad hookers, but also be really chill about dogs.
You mentioned the pandemic a little bit and COVID-19 shutting down Vegas and shutting down all the shows and everything that kind of went along with that. Something that I admired a lot about so many Vegas performers was you guys didn't sit still. When things kind of went sideways, you found other ways to fill your time and other things to do. So many performers that I've talked to post-pandemic had said they appreciated kind of having the time to be able to work on other projects. And you did that as well in capitalizing on what might have been possibly the biggest trend of the beginning of the pandemic with Tiger King. You put together a project called Tiger Thing. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I only know how to do 3 things: smoke pot, buy action figures, and create art on stage. And tell stories. That's all I know how to do. And I'm very good at all 3 of those. So when the pandemic happened and the Netflix show happened, when I saw it, like we all did, I was just like, I understood that guy. I mean, like, we're not that far apart in age, frankly, as much as I might hate to admit it. And while, I've not had as toxic a masculine situation as he had, but I understand, like, a guy from the South not being comfortable with his sexuality and acting out, and I just got him, and he's an entertainer. It's we all have that drive to want to be star. I mean, I get where he comes from, and I have seen drugs destroy people. I have seen people really become creatures that they are not because of hard drugs. So I was fascinated by him, and I thought there has to be, again, got to be a way to capitalize on this and turn this something like this is a character I can do. And I've never been an impressionist or anything like that. I've always been an actor, but like I can play this character. So with my writing partner, because we'd written another show called Baritones of Love that we were trying to get out there, like had it ready to go on boats, and then the pandemic happened, and so I was like, let's write some songs. And it was really just meant to be like a concept album, which is what it was really, the Tiger Cycle thing. And that's how it all started, was just like he and I wrote some songs. Mark Weary, just a really incredible songwriter and lyricist and stuff. And then we recorded them with it was a great time. Like Ashley Fuller, people were available, like Aaron Fuller, Ashley Fuller, and Aaron Fuller, Sean DeGraff. We're just available so that, willing to do a project for free. I was able to get it, videotaped and stuff by Pete Housley. And then my fascination with the character didn't die there. I really wanted to figure out some way to bring him to a Vegas stage. Like I would really love to really explore it artistically and, take the concept album further. But also, I live in Las Vegas, and you're trying to do 10 o'clock shows in front of dogs and hookers. So again, as a Buddhist, I believe you have to speak to a person's capacity to hear, and you have to speak to an audience's capacity to hear. Otherwise, you can't do, classical Shakespeare at 10 p.m. for a Las Vegas audience at the Miracle Mile V Theater, right? So how to take the tiger, that character, and what I do, and make a show out of it that could be a Vegas, that could sit in the firmament of Vegas. Mm-hmm. So as a creature, he's just fat. He's just so American, there are parts of him that are monstrous. He has done monstrous things. But a lot of that was, coming from, and someone had told Joe, Schriebvogel, I love you, at some point in his life when he was a child, he might have never been on Netflix. If he didn't come from, that toxic masculine Oklahoma environment that he came from, who knows? And then lost his partner to has suffered so much. That's when he went off the rails, is when he lost his partner, the one that he was really in love with. And that's when it became the drugs, and the drugs feed into your narcissism and your insanity. You can't do meth that long without it really having a substantial effect on your personality, mm-hmm. and your ability to function in this world as what we would, a normal, healthy human being. So I can't help but have empathy for that person and also realize he's a monster. But he's uniquely American, you know what I'm saying? And also, America loves the second act. Who knows what? You know, it would be fantastic if he could use some of this to help the shit that goes on with animals and big cat. I mean, it really is crazy.
It was just such a train wreck. I know my wife and I, we were a little bit late to the party on it, and we started watching Tiger King, and we thought, oh wow, this is weird. Like, how can this be real? And then it just kept getting crazier and crazier and crazier.
When the kid killed himself accidentally, that's when it really took a dark turn. Like, it was, oh, ha, 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 funny. And then that happened. You're like, oh, wow, this is like, but then his increasing behavior of like talking about like at the funeral, his behavior at the funeral, his behavior, like, it's shocking what Americans will do in front of a camera. It is shocking what human beings will do. Like, we're just cavemen with iPhones is what I think. No, I was fascinated by him, and also I just thought it was a venue for me to try to do something. And then Penny Wiggins got involved, who's a Las Vegas legend and stuff. And so we're building it right now. We're in the process of creating this. Magic and Mullets is sort of what we're calling it right now. But the idea is that Joe breaks out of prison and goes right to Las Vegas because he wants to be a superstar, and he wants to be loved, and he wants to capitalize on the fame that everyone else has been capitalizing on. And he does a little show, and then Carol breaks in, and then there's like a triple, quadruple marriage, and then the meth lab explodes.
I will absolutely buy tickets to that show.
I think I'm insane. I can't tell you how many times a day I go, am I crazy? And then I go, no, you're not crazy. This is fine. You're doing okay. And then I'm like, I am crazy. There isn't. And then I think I need more crazy. There isn't enough crazy. It's a crazy little experience building this show, but I've been loving it. I'm working with it's zombie cast members and stuff. It's like a side project for us, and everyone's just been so generous with their creativity, and we've been having a blast.
I love it. Is that something you found with Las Vegas and this is something I've noticed in the people that I've talked to, is everybody is willing to jump in and help each other out. I mean, you mentioned having zombie cast members come in, and then all the people that helped you with this initially and putting their time in. I mean, it really is amazing how willing everyone is to help each other out. Like, compared to, from what I've heard of other cities like LA and New York, where people are willing to stab each other in the face over parts and roles and auditions and such.
Yeah, it's a tiny little town, and you have to get along. And the thing about this town is, the way you get work is somebody recommends you, or your reputation. And so all you have in this town is your reputation and what people say about you and whether or not they're willing to work for you or recommend you. Like, for girls, it's different, but boys, like, there isn't a lot of work and stuff. But girls, like, but I know it's the same. Like, there's so much work for girls. Go and this and that. They're trying to get shifts covered. So, like, you can't be stabbing girls in the back, because then no one will work with you or recommend you for a job and stuff. Like, this town is so small. And everyone's a hustler here. Everyone is a hustler here. It's just a town of hustlers. So, like, if they think that project they want to work with you, or they think that my project, or they just want to get out there so that their name is out there, like, you just do it, And so, yeah, everyone's so generous. And especially, for Monday's Dark or things like that, of course, like, everyone's going to show up for charity, and like, that's this town, man. Like, of course, I only know how to do one thing that I can do in front of people. I can't buy action figures and smoke pot in front of people, so I can just entertain. Like, if I can use that skill set to help win-win charity, or whatever charity, the LGBTQ center, or whatever, like, I'm going to do it, because, I mean, that's my calling. You have to help in this world. It's unbelievable how people just go to Kenny Davidson's and sing, and really show up when you need them. It's, very fortunate. I really love this town. I really don't have words to express what a great town Las Vegas has been to me. I know a lot of people maybe it doesn't work for, but these last 19 years have really have been remarkable for me, I must say.
Excellent. Enoch, if people want to keep up with what you've got going on, find out where you're going to be performing, learn about your show, get etiquette tips on the correct way to bring a hooker to one of your performances, how do they go about doing that?
I am the Robot Buddha on Twitter and Instagram. And you can find me on Facebook. Enoch A. Scott, Baritones of Love, has a Facebook page. The Tiger Thing has a Facebook page, so look that up and like it and look at some of the stuff that's up there. Tiger Thing is also on the YouTube. There's a Tiger Thing YouTube channel that has the original concept album that we did, and some of my stand-up and anything that I sort of do as the Tiger Thing character. I like to try and put up there.
And Zombie Burlesque, that is at Planet Hollywood.
Planet Hollywood, Miracle Mile Shops. It's at the V Theater. We're 6 nights a week. We're only dark on Sundays, so Monday through Saturday, 8 p.m. And the Tiger Thing will hopefully be opening by spring break, maybe even by Valentine's Day, but hopefully in the next 2 months. Whatever this crazy thing I'm creating will be on a stage at 9:30, right after Zombie Burlesque, in the same theater, V Theater. So look for that.
Awesome. Enoch, thank you so much for jumping on and chatting. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I love it running my mouth. So thank you so much for giving me an opportunity.
Once again, if you want to follow Enoch on Twitter and Instagram, you can find him at The Robot Buddha. And be sure to check out Zombie Burlesque online at zombieburlesque.com for tickets and info. Of course, you can get all these links and more in the show notes at jeffdoesvegas.com. And that wraps up another episode of the Jeff Does Vegas podcast. If you've got feedback on this episode of the show, or any other episode for that matter, or you've got suggestions and ideas for topics you'd like me to cover on the podcast, please feel free to reach out to me via Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Jeff Does Vegas, or drop me an email directly at jeff@jeffdoesvegas.com. In the meantime, thank you so much for checking out the show. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts so you'll know the moment new episodes are available. And don't forget to visit jeffdoesvegas.com for past episodes and show notes. The Jeff Does Vegas podcast is a Walker New Media production.